today's video, we're going to be going over how to create text and make it three-dimensional using Photoshop's three-dimensional workspace. I did this way back when I owned a 3D printing company, and I would make either basically little charms, and I would make them either into a necklace or a bracelet, usually into a keychain. Very easy to do, very simple, anyone can do it, and we're going to find out how to do it right here in this video, so stick around. In today's video, we are going over how to create 3D printable text in Adobe Photoshop's 3D workspace. Back in the day when I had a 3D printing company, I would go ahead and make basically letters, and I would print them into little charms. But sometimes I would even go as much as printing off an entire logo. So today I want to go in and show you guys how to go ahead and make 3D printable text, and maybe you guys can start your own little small scale business doing this as well, or maybe you guys can even do this as a hobby. So let's go ahead and get into this. So let's go ahead and open Photoshop. If you don't already have it open, go ahead and click on create new document, and go ahead and I'm going to use the 1920 by 1080. It really doesn't matter what size you guys use for a piece of paper, whether it's paper. You guys can get this by going to web and then 1920 by 1080. My screen size is just 1920 by 1080, so that's what I work with. And for doing this, I would recommend doing this in horizontal, and go ahead and create. And now that we have our file created, we go ahead and click T for text, and that will bring us up to our text tool, and it will automatically create text for us when we click on the screen. But I'm going to rename this text and call it 3D text. I'm just doing it in all caps because it looks better that way. And I'm going to go ahead and center the text. Now, because I am in my text tool right now, I have to go into the check mark there to verify my stuff, and then I can hit the V tool to go into the move tool. I'm going to go ahead and try and center this up on the page. And now that I have the text somewhat centered on the page here, we're going to go ahead and hit U on our keyboard to bring us to our shape tool. And if we go over here to where the shape tool lives and right click on that, just make sure we have the rectangle tool selected, because the keyboard will bring you to the shape tool in general. So whatever was the last shape that you went and created in Photoshop is the default it will bring up at that point. So we're going to be using rectangle here, and just go ahead and drag out a rectangle, and we need it to be just under the text there. If it goes a little over, don't worry about that, and go ahead and let go. And for our height, we want to make sure it's about 35, so let's go over here to our height tool, change that over to 35, hit enter to accept those changes. And now we want to make sure it's going to be aligned to this text right here. So I'm going to go over to my ruler, right click and hold, and I'm going to drag down a guide. Now it should automatically snap into place, but I'm bringing this guide in here just to make sure. If you guys want to learn more about guides, you guys could go ahead and watch my other tutorial about rulers and guides. And we want to go ahead and have this snap just to that. And if you notice, if I had it snap just to the text, and I'm going to hold Alt just to zoom in here. If I have it, it would snap right to the 3. But when we come to the D, we're not exactly overlapping 100%. So that's why I want to go in and just make sure. We might even want to be able to adjust this just a bit to the D if we can. And it's not going to let me do that. So that's okay. We're going to adjust it right to there just to make sure that when we scroll, all the text is aligned on that one line right there. So we have to have it all connecting. That's the rule when we're doing this, is we have to make sure that everything's connected. I just hit Control 0 just so I can zoom out to my full artboard. So now that everything's connected, when we go ahead and we do this, when we go ahead and print this, we now know that all the text is going to be right where it is currently. So if we want to go ahead, and we can always do any sort of alignment changes we want to the text. Maybe we want to change the kerning on it or something like that. But for right now, that should be fine, just to do an easy explanation of this. So now that we have that, we can go ahead, we get rid of our guide right here, and we can just go ahead, bring it right up to our ruler, and it disappears forever. So now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and select both these layers in our layer panel. And I just want to make sure that they're centered. There we go. Just want to make sure this is centered with this. If you want to go ahead and change that, go back to type U on our keyboard to get back to the shape tool. And we go ahead, Control T for transform. Oh, I'm sorry. I had everything selected here. So we're going to do, we just want our rectangle tool selected. And then we do Control T. And then we can go ahead and do this. So let's go ahead and maybe bring that in just a bit, just so it's not overcrowded, just so it's not going over too much there. And just go ahead and click OK to accept that change. And then again, we're going to have to go ahead and select both the layers, holding Shift to select both of them. And then we want to go ahead, hit V to go to our Move tool, and just make sure that all that is centered. So now that we have everything centered and all of our text is connected, we can tell we've zoomed in, we've held Alt, we've zoomed in that way, just to make sure all the text is sitting on that one line that we have right there. We can now go ahead and select, keep these both selected here. So if we want to select one, hold Shift and then select the other one, and go ahead, right click, and now we want to go ahead and merge the layers. So go ahead and merge layers there. And now that it's merged, we want to go ahead, right click again, and then go ahead and say new 3D extrusion from selected layer. And it says you're going to go into your 3D workspace. Yes, that's fine. And now we can see that we are in our 3D workspace. Go ahead. I'm just going to do Control minus just so I can see a little bit better here. And as you can see, if I'm going to go over here, I'm going to make sure my orbit, I'm clicking on this little orbit sign just to make sure that we're in orbit mode. If you see my little cursor, it looks like a planet. And what I'm doing right now is I'm actually changing the rotation of the text, which is not what I want to do. So I'm going to hit Control Z just to make sure our text goes back to the way it was. And I'm going to make sure that we orbit the camera. Not the text at all, just the camera, just the way the camera is seeing it. And sometimes your mouse might go this way and you can't do that again. Just let go of your left click and go ahead, just scale backwards. Now you might not notice, but this is really thick. Like, this is extremely thick text. Something which, if you actually did go ahead and print this, it would be way too thick. So see right here, now we're in, let's see, because knowing where you are in this environment is so important. We're in our rectangle 1, and then we're in this star, I forgot what they call this. Oh, the mesh. Okay, so we're in the mesh panel, and it says it's 2.474. Guys, we don't want that. That's way too thick. We're going to want this to be more like 0.5 to 0.75. So let's do that. Or 0.50 to 0.75. So somewhere around there, that should be fine. 0.75, you guys should not need it to be thicker than that. That should be fine for standing on its own. You guys shouldn't even need to go to a full inch. Now, if we go ahead and change our view here, right now we're kind of in a front view. Go ahead, right click anywhere in this white area here, and go ahead, go on and click on the camera, and we're going to change our view over to our right view. We can either do the right or left view, but in this case we want to do right view. And in our properties panel, we want to go over here to our coordinates. Oh, that's not our coordinates. This is our coordinates. Go to our coordinates tab, if you will, or button over here for coordinates, and we want to go ahead on our x-axis, and we want to change that to 90 degrees. So this way it is flat and can be saved as flat on the table. And then we have this nice little button right here, move to ground. Bam. Now we still have this on the ground, but let's go ahead and check our measurements up here from our top view. Just open this up a little bit here, and we can see that's 13 inches wide, and we don't want that. It's way too big for what we need. Actually, in fact, I want to take that out just so I could see my tall measurements, 2.47 inches. That should be fine. just this width. It's this 13.46. We got to change that. So let's go on our y-axis, and we don't want to go to this first one here or the second one that will rotate. I want to go to this third one right here where it's scale along the x-axis. Now we could scale, and it's going to scale uniformly to make everything look good for us here, so we don't even have to hold shift. Well, let's just go and make that about 6.5 inches. I'll make it 6.25 inches because some printers are bigger, have bigger platforms than others. So let's say we scaled that to about 6.25 inches. I know it's much smaller, but it can actually print on a 3D printer now. And now all we need to do is we can now go to our scene. And from scene, we can go right here into our properties panel, this little printer with a plus sign on it. And right here, you could choose to decide if you want to do it from a local printer or if you want to send it out to a third-party printer. So if you don't have a 3D printer, this would be the option you'd want to be going with. But let's say you do have a local printer. We could go ahead and say local. We could say an STL file. You also have the choice of 3M files, PDF files, STL files, and SVX files. Most 3D printers are going to want to deal with STL files. So even if you did decide to use, let's say 3 hubs, for example, or 3D hubs, I know for a fact that with 3D hubs, you can just upload this into 3D hubs, and it would work that way too. You are going to want to choose for detail. You obviously want this at the highest quality. And what's going to help you here is that if you do have a 3D printer and at your house and you know what the scale volume is, you could actually scale it to the bed size. So this way, if it did come out too big, it can automatically resize itself to whatever the bed size is that you specify right here. To export this, all we have to do is go to this item right here, which is literally a 3D printer because it has a little print icon right there for 3D printing. It's going to generate a mesh. It's going to repair whatever meshes we have, because sometimes your text can still be generated bad in a 3D image when you go to convert it, and this is just going to go in and try and fix any of that ahead of time. And if there is a problem, it will show you in the options, but we'll go ahead and come back in a second when this is all done. So now that Photoshop has finished making out our file here, it's almost like a render. I think it's different than a render because we're not actually rendering it per se. We're more like exporting it, and then Photoshop is fixing everything. And now that Photoshop has gone in and finished creating our preview here of our 3D image, we can go ahead and we have a couple other options here. We can double check our size, just make sure our size is the way we made it originally. Now I'm using inches in this example, but most likely you should be using millimeters when it comes to doing anything with 3D printing. 3D printing is much more friendly with millimeters, even though it can all be converted. We can go ahead and turn on the shadow, which there's really no reason to turn on shadow here, but let's go ahead and look at our repair key by turning on show repair. We can see that Photoshop has done no repairing. No walls have been thickened. There's no hole closed by Photoshop or anything like that. It is just simply the text because there's really nothing wrong with it. It's only going to repair something if it thinks a 3D printer can't actually go through and print something in this shape. So if we go ahead, we can click export. And if we go ahead and open up my documents here, there's our file. There's our 3D text file. Now Windows does have a program for opening up 3D files, and we'll go ahead and open it up. And this is how simple it is, guys, to create 3D text. All we did was we put a rectangle under them, make sure that the rectangle touched the text that we had available. And if you put this in through a 3D printer, you guys would have no problem at all printing this text. It's quite simple to do this, and if you guys decided that you wanted to print text one at a time, one letter at a time, as initials or something like that, you can also go ahead and do that. You guys don't even have to put that there if you don't want to. This is just to make it so one whole word or words can fit on one 3D print at a time, so you could stand it up. So that is it, guys. That is how easy it is to do 3D text. If you guys like this video, go ahead and give this video a like. If you guys want to see more content about web design and digital development, please subscribe to the channel. as well as leave some comments in the comment section below about maybe some easier ways I could have gone about doing this, or other videos you want to see in the future. Okay guys, that is it for me for today. I will see you guys in the next video.